Your Royal Highness, Minister for the Environment in Sweden, Andreas Carlgren, dear Nobel laureates, colleagues, friends, what are we waiting for? I think that was a very important starting point for this symposium, and thanks for that inspiring and thoughtful starting point, dear Crown Princess. And it really starts with another call from Stockholm. The first call from Stockholm, in fact, is in 1972, which postulated that we in fact only have one Earth. And this dialogue in the third Nobel Laureate Symposium on Global Sustainability, hosted by the Royal Academy of Sciences, the Bayer Institute, Stockholm Environment Institute, the Stockholm Resilience Center, and the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, builds on the extraordinary scientific advancements since the call from Stockholm in 1972, with a humbling realization that, yes, we have an extraordinary equilibrium of the planet today supporting human development, and yes, that even though we are seeing potentials of life forms out in the universe, we have the humbling realization that one Earth is in fact our predicament, operating in a situation where we believe as if we would have 1, 2, or 3 Earths to live on. So yes, there's evidence to suggest that we're now on a human-dominated planet, which is the starting point for the dialogue at this symposium, looking at opportunities to a great transformation towards sustainability. And in this human-dominated planet, we must recognize that the challenges we're facing really starts in the ethical responsibility for a world population of 7 billion people, more or less committed to 9 billion people in only 40 years. And it's an ethical and equity challenge because we know that it's predominantly the rich minority on the planet through affluent, unsustainable lifestyles that has put us in the predicament of today, and the right to development among the 80% or so that today live in poor economies have a right to development and also therefore a larger right for the ecological space on the planet. The two previous symposia have focused very strongly on this connect between climate change and development, a tremendously important challenge given that climate change is the defining challenge in terms of risks of catastrophic outcomes for humanity. But we now want to broaden this discussion at this symposium to also connect to the fact that we have interactive ecosystem changes in the living biosphere, which are equally important and interact today with climate change, forming the foundation, the life support foundation for human development. And the drama is that science also provides evidence that surprise, that may in fact, to say, destabilize the planet, can no longer be excluded. That we have social and ecological drivers now occurring at a pace where we can no longer exclude not only that the Arctic may accelerate into an ice-free state, but also that societies may become more brittle if we undermine our life support systems. This is a new cocktail for human development. This redefines sustainability entirely. This places human development at the center, and that it's our future at stake when we are, to say, challenging the life support systems on the planet. And we have evidence to this, which we'll go through the symposium, in terms of the negative acceleration of pressures on the planet, which range across essentially all environmental parameters. But we will also focus on the fact that this exact curve applies also for very positive developments. John Sulston is with us, Nobel Prize laureate, who has been part of the acceleration of our mapping of the human genome and the acceleration of our ability today to work with nature for sustainable development. We also have the extraordinary development on a teleconnected planet. It took 150 years to connect the first billion people on the planet. It took 20 years to connect the next 3 billion people on the planet. We're truly interconnected in our knowledge interface. And of course, we have a tremendous poverty challenge, but it's also good to remind ourselves that the positive curve is exactly the same. In fact, the vast majority of this planet today have a life expectancy exceeding 60 years, and that most women on this planet give birth to 2 or less children per woman. These are all positive developments to interconnect with this, so to say, price tag we've now had for this development. Now, one of the key issues for this symposium is posing the question, are we in a situation where we need to now rely on science in its evidence, despite all uncertainties, to say that we may, in fact, have a very precious equilibrium that has supported human development over the last 10,000 years, and that we now may be pushing this too close to tipping points where we could destabilize the equilibrium over the last 10,000 years. And what do we need to do to avoid moving out of this stability domain? So we are in a new situation. We're in a situation where we will be suggesting, based on science, that we may be exiting the Holocene, the stable geological state of the last 10,000 years, entering what another of our co-Nobel laureates for this meeting, Paul Crutzen, has stated as a new geological era, the Anthropocene, where we humans are the dominant force of change. But we also want to recognize that people are an integrated part of the biosphere. We need to change the perspective of our relationship with the planet, and we also therefore must confront this crisis and turn them into opportunities of innovation and novel ideas on ways forward. And we will be exploring the concrete evidence of such opportunities based on the windows that open after, so to say, changing the perspectives. So the strategic objectives are to, based on the previous symposia, look at this great transformation, reconnect people with the biosphere, and also connecting the sustainability agenda with social justice, poverty alleviation, and economic development, that these are interconnected agendas today, and we need to look more deeply into those actions that are required when they are connected. Articulate a new emphasis that now is the time, the juncture in human development, when we need to safeguard the resilience of the planet, its capacity to continue to stay in equilibrium, and we want to look at innovations and pathways forward. And doing that in a way where we say goodbye, so to say, to the obsolete thinking that we have a distinct difference between development and environment. It's no longer about environmental protection, it's about stewardship of the planet for our own development. So in essence, to summarize, we want to look essentially at three global dimensions of the opportunities arising, recognizing that there are boundaries residing in the Earth system coming out of science, that there are a number of opportunities now right in our doorstep where we can move forward on energy, on poverty, on food, on transport, etc. And that this requires a new approach of stewardship. And we'll be exploring these together during these days forward. And we'll do that in 3 sessions to close here on my side before handing over to John, that we'll start with a discussion on the global predicament of human development within planetary boundaries, looking into the opportunities of going from exploitation to stewardship and doing that in a way that also benefits poverty alleviation and development, and exploring opportunities from innovations in different sectors to technologies, policies, innovations within institutions. And this all will be handed over, which is a very exciting opportunity, when tomorrow afternoon Ban Ki-moon, the UN General Secretary's high-level panel on global sustainability, the equivalent of the Brundtland Commission in 1992, which has now been put in place to define a plan and a vision for humanity to be able to transform to a sustainable future, will be joining us tomorrow, and will be handing over the outcome of this meeting, which is a Stockholm memorandum, a message from this meeting signed by Nobel laureates, which will guide the work of the panel, which will be presenting its agenda to the Earth Summit in June 2012. So it's truly a unique opportunity for us in a dialogue to move this important agenda forward. And then we'll finish this symposium on Thursday with an outreach day where many of the Nobel laureates will remain, with some of the panel members as well, to talk to business leaders, young entrepreneurs, over 500 people in the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Sweden, to take the immediate step from symposium dialogue to action. We really want this to be not a one-step event, it's a process. We want to be active in dialogues all the way to the Rio conference. We want to have regional conferences, dialogues on this, and that will be done through this start on Thursday. And then please, John, the context of this. Why are we here and how did it begin? By the way, I should perhaps...
Oh, I can introduce myself. So, Your Royal Highness, Minister, Nobel laureates, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. So I'm John Schellnhuber, I'm director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and this was actually the first meeting of that type. In 2007, I acted as chief scientific advisor to the German government, also in the preparation of the G8 summit. And Chancellor Merkel, who is a physicist by training, in a discussion with her, we more or less invented that idea. So she hosted actually the first meeting. Some of the people in the room will recognize themselves, like Walter Kohn, whom I had the privilege to work with in Santa Barbara a long, long time ago as a postdoc. And so we started in 2007. It ended in a very interesting memorandum, I think, the Potsdam memorandum here, like we're looking forward to the Stockholm memorandum. And the word great transformation was mentioned for the first time in this context. Now, we went on into 2009, so Prince Charles provided his fine palace for us as a venue. Also the Royal Society, Martin Rees, who is here as the president of the Royal Society, and a number of more concrete items were named here in the context, milestones of the great transformation, if you like. So an international agreement, these were the months in the run-up to the Copenhagen conference, low carbon infrastructure, forest protection, very, very dear subject for Prince Charles in this case, but also what you see here, a peak of global emissions by the year 2015, which is extremely ambitious, of course, as we know, and also based on a carbon budget, so to speak, a global management of the carbon cycle. Now, we had a memorandum, also the St. James Palace memorandum. It was actually signed by 59 Nobel laureates from all over the world, so tremendous success. And what are we going to do now? And I give you a personal perspective on this, because we all talk about these noble things. I mean, noble now, not related to Alfred Nobel, but noble cause in the sense, of course, we all want to save the world for our children and grandchildren. But how are we going to do that? How are we going to deliver? That's the question. So I'm a physicist by training, so I'm talk about this in terms of multiple equilibria, if you like. But before I do that, I just show you this. You know, when you look at the IPCC and the projections, we always end at the year 2100. But let's assume, for some good reasons, that the world is not going to end in the year 2100. I have a 3-year-old son, believe it or not, and under normal medical progress, so to speak, he may see the end of his century. So it's just one generation away, imagine. But if you go beyond the year 2100, because of the inertia in the physical climate system, global warming will go on and on. So these are the concentrations. This is a new package calculated for the next IPCC report, where under various emission scenarios, you can end up with concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere according to the lines on the right. So in the best of all worlds, we will peak around the year 2100 at 420 ppm, and very, very slowly, over hundreds and hundreds of years, CO2 will sort of decline again. But in all other worlds, and business as usual is the red line, we will go way beyond 1000 ppm. Imagine. So the only way actually to hold the blue line is extracting carbon from the atmosphere after the year 2050. It will be negative emissions actually. And this is very, very solid evidence here. Now, the crossroads, which the Crown Princess referred to, in this case is the red fan or the blue fan. This is again going into the year 2300. The red fan is including all the uncertainties. Why? It's not just a solid line, it's a fan. So you have all the uncertainties in the climate models, but it means we can go up to 6 or 8 degrees warming. And again, this is not alarmism. This is very solid evidence. While the blue world is the alternative, but it means we have to use all efforts we can make. Now, global warming is very unfair. I'll give you just this glimpse of evidence. Actually, I presented it at the Pontifical Academy meeting, which was organized by Paul Crutzen here. Carlo Rubbia was there and many other people. And this shows you, in the scenario, the blue line I've shown you, there will be a sea level rise on the left-hand side of at least 1 meter by the end of the century. But it will be distributed in a very inhomogeneous way on the planet. It will not be sea level rise the same in all places. Actually, off the coast of Greenland, where all the ice will melt down, the sea level will even be sinking. While the bulge, the crest of the sea level rise, will be in the Pacific, and it will be in the equatorial zone. So those countries, like the small island states, who never contributed to global warming, will get all the impacts in the end. It's extremely unfair. Nature is unfair. Actually, nature is not responsible in any way for that. In the end, it's humanity. Now, the multiple equilibrium. Now, this is a potential curve, so Johan has shown it to you already. If you have a phase transition in a system, you know, a system goes from one mode of operation into the other, like a collapse of the Greenland ice sheet, collapse of the Amazon rainforest, tipping point, so to speak. It means that the potential where the equilibrium is deformed. So this could be, as the planet warms, this potential is deformed and the system may go into a new local equilibrium. These are the tipping elements in the Earth system, but the same is true. And that is why I put a question mark behind that. Do we really want to tip the scales in order to have new modes of operation for the Indian summer monsoon, for the sea ice in the Arctic, for the Amazon rainforest and so on? Do we really want to bring about that phase transition which will affect billions of people on this planet? In order to avoid tipping the scale in the geophysical sense, I think we have to tip the scales regarding the human dimensions in society. And I think that is the biggest theme during this conference here. And I show you what it means. Now, this is about multiple equilibria. Let's just assume the current system, I call the fossil nuclear system, we are sitting in a local optimum. So if you see this as a cost function, a global cost function, we're sitting on the left-hand side, and people think this is the global optimum. There's no better way to run the planet and our economy. Yeah? But actually, science, we have a radar system. We can look beyond the little hill, which is separating us from a global optimum, which is much, much better. Of course, it would be the sustainable, renewable optimum. But people are very afraid of an uphill struggle, actually, because we're sitting in a wonderful equilibrium. Now, if you move away, it will come with costs. But what we do today is even, deepening the hole we are sitting in. For example, through subsidies for fossil fuels, and steepening the hill which is separating us from the global optimum, for example, by bureaucracy against renewable energies and so on. What we have to do is making the hole we are sitting in more shallow, so to speak, by carbon tax, for example, and making the hill which we have to overcome smaller, for example, by research and development, investing in technology. And then this glorious thing will happen, which I'm going to show you now. We will move across the hill. As a physicist, I could also plead for the tunnel effect. So we may rely on quantum mechanics, but maybe it will not work at the planetary scale. So we have to give this ball a little push. But before that, we have to make the landscape much more capable for the transition to sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. This reminds me, Brian Walker is with us from Australia here, says that we should avoid the first law of holes. When you're in one, stop digging. And this is exactly what this symposium is all about. Your Royal Highness, you've given us a challenge, a 911 call from the future. We have picked the receiver, and we're going to take the next generation very seriously in our deliberations to also be able to look at exactly these transformations towards a desired future. Your Royal Highness, thank you for enriching and giving us the great incentive for the dialogue we'll have today and tomorrow. It's been a tremendous privilege, and we're now thanking Your Royal Highness for your presence. I understand you unfortunately have to leave us, so I ask everyone to rise, and thank you for